I think people have such a flat, one-dimensional view of the biblical world. It's like we read the Bible as if the biblical people, the biblical characters existed in this exclusive bubble. But that's not true at all. The people of the Bible existed and lived in the multifaceted world that is the ancient Near East. And that's why when you read the Bible, you'll see that there are all these different interactions between the people of the Bible and other people of the ancient Near East. And one of the most frequent interactions we see in the Bible is between biblical people and Egypt. I mean, honestly, just think about it. Abraham and Sarah, they go to Egypt twice. Joseph and all his drama takes place in Egypt. And we can't forget Moses and the Exodus accounts being in Egypt, outside of Egypt, all around Egypt. King Solomon interacts with Egypt. King Rehoboam, Hezekiah, Josiah. All three of these babies have some type of interaction with Egypt. All of these interactions and encounters that we see in the Bible with Egypt is exactly why studying Egyptian artifacts and Egyptian inscriptions and Egyptian writings is so important. Because these things help us to understand what these interactions meant. And ultimately, they give us a better picture of the world of the Bible and help us see how people were living in it. So that's what I want to do in this video. I want to talk about some Egyptian finds that I believe have been great for helping us to understand and just appreciate the Bible better. But before we get into any of that, I am Erica. This is Just So You Know, and I'm all about talking about biblical archaeology. So if you haven't already, make sure you're following, make sure you're subscribed so you can get in on all this biblical archaeological content. Okay, the Bible, Egypt, let's get into it. All right, y'all, so in the Bible, in Genesis 12, we read that there's a famine in the land, so Abraham and Sarah traveled from Canaan to Egypt, right? And then in Genesis 26, we read how Isaac was about to go to Egypt because of another famine in Canaan, but Yahweh stopped him from going. And then in Genesis 42, Jacob sends his sons, aka Joseph's messy brothers. He sends them to Egypt for yet another famine in Canaan. Well, what if I told you that there are Egyptian writings that date to around the same time period as Sarah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Joseph, talking about the same type of movement of people coming from Canaan to Egypt, but from the Egyptian perspective? And real quick, I do have two videos where I talk about the biblical timeline in detail and another where I talk about the Egyptian timeline in detail. So if you wanted a little bit more information about the timelines and even compare the two and see how they're linking up, I suggest you check out those two videos on my channels. Anyways, okay, so there are two ancient writings that I want to highlight and an artifact. The two writings are the Instructions of Merikare and the Prophecy of Neferti. And then the artifact is the Beni Hasan Scene. So first, let's talk about the ancient Egyptian text known as the Instructions of Merikare. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but we're just gonna go with Merikare for the video, okay? The Instruction from Merikare, which dates to the Egyptian Middle Kingdom period, is this fictional historical writing that's all about how the borders of Egypt were really shaky at that time and warns about the dangers of allowing foreigners to keep coming in and out of Egypt, specifically foreigners that were east of Egypt. So in the instruction, King Keti is talking to his son, Merikare, and he just goes all the way off on a group of people known as the Asiatics. And he's like, these miserable Asiatics, they ain't got no water. They barely got any wood. They always moving around looking for food. And they've been doing this for too long. Later on in the instruction, he even insults them by calling them crocodiles. Now, what you need to know is that the word Asiatic is what Egyptians use to refer to Semitic people or nomadic or semi-nomadic people who came from the region of Canaan. And sometimes we generally just call this area the Levant. Now, the Instruction of Merikare is not specifically talking about Abraham and Sarah or Isaac or Jacob, but it is talking about people like them, aka tribal nomadic people coming from the region of Canaan to Egypt for supplies and whatnot. Now, I wanted to highlight the Instruction of Merikare because, first of all, it just goes to show you that what the Bible is talking about during the time of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Jacob, the Egyptian writings are talking about the same things during that same time too. too, giving us this shared historical connection. And secondly, I just think it's so interesting to get an Egyptian perspective about all of this. Like, you can see that there are at least some people who really do feel some type of way about these people coming in from Canaan looking for food and water and such. And I think it just adds this additional colorful layer to these narratives in a way that we really probably didn't realize before. Another ancient Egyptian text that reflects the same attitude about Asiatics coming into ancient Egypt is the Prophecy of Neferti. Now, the Prophecy of Neferti dates to the Middle Kingdom period, and again, that's the time period that's most often connected to the biblical patriarchs. That's Abraham and them. And it's talking about how there was need to build some type of structure to keep the Asiatics out of Egypt so they wouldn't come in begging for water and food, and how keeping them out would be the best way for maintaining order. So with the Prophecy of Neferti, we've got ancient Egyptians talking about the same type of movement around the same type of time as we see in the biblical text. And again, this just gives us another shared historical connection between the people of Canaan and Egypt. And again, we see that there were obviously some Egyptians that really felt some type of way about these people coming into the land the way they was. And then lastly, there's the Beni Hasan scene. The Beni Hasan scene is this famous wall painting located inside the Middle Kingdom period tomb of Khenhotep II at Beni Hasan. And yep, we're still dealing with the same time period as Abraham and Sarah and all of them. Now with the Beni Hasan scene, we get a visual depiction of how the Egyptians would have viewed the Asiatics or the Semitic people that were coming into their land. When you look at the Asiatics on the scene, you can see this group of Asiatics entering into Egypt, and they have their goods and their livestock with them, and they even have their leader at the front of the procession in the position of prominence. What's so interesting is that when you look at this scene, you can see their skin tone and their hair. You can see them wearing distinctly non-Egyptian types of clothing. Now, what's different about this scene is that it doesn't depict Asiatics coming into Egypt because of a famine. They're coming in for trade, but it does still demonstrate that Asiatics, people from Canaan, people like Abraham and them, they were definitely still coming in and out of Egypt for whatever reason during this particular time period. And honestly, I personally just love how we get a visual depiction of what these Asiatics would have looked like to the Egyptians. So listen, the Instruction of Merikare, the Prophecy of Neferti, and the Beni Hasan scene, they really do a good job of helping to support the historical reliability of the accounts of Abraham and Sarah, or Isaac, or Jacob. And real talk, I could have thrown in a few more. I just really want to highlight these because these are some of the ones that I like the best. But on top of demonstrating historical reliability, I think that these ancient writings and this wall scene really help show us how Egyptians felt about people like Abraham, people like Isaac, people like Jacob, or people just like them in general. And it just adds this multi-dimensional layer to these biblical narratives in a way that we didn't have before, and makes them that much more real to me. So if you like this video, you already know what to do. Make sure you like it, make sure you share it, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And that's just so you know.